Evil Presence is a really interesting card that's pretty underrated in my opinion. Evil Presence is an enchantment aura that enchants a land and costs 1 black mana to cast. The land enchanted with Evil Presence becomes a swamp. That means that the land loses all of its abilities and can be tapped to produce a black mana. Notably, its name does not change, and it also doesn't change if the land is legendary, basic, or a snow land. Now, if you don't understand what makes this card so good, that's understandable, so let's talk about it. The best thing to do with Evil Presence is to turn a powerful and useful land into a swamp. The more impactful the land, the more impactful this card can be. As an example, if you hit a Library of Alexandria, a Bazaar of Baghdad, or a Mishra's Factory, or a Caracas, or a Tabernacle at Pendrell Vale, or a Tolarian Academy, or a Dark Depths, then this card is sick as fuck. Obviously, turning a land into a swamp isn't quite the same as destroying it, but in some situations it is better. Like if they have a Crucible of Worlds, for example. Now, in most situations it's not better, but there are niche situations where it is. Evil Presence is basically a targeted Blood Moon, but it only costs 1 mana. I personally think that this thing is pretty solid in any format with cracked lands. I can't really speak to Vintage or Legacy, but I do think this is a reasonable card in Commander, and I think it's underplayed in Old School. It's probably decent in Pre-Modern as well, but I don't really have the experience to speak on that. If you play Pre-Modern, you should tell me in the comments if you think this is decent there. I don't even honestly know what lands are legal in Pre-Modern. Actually, I guess if you play any format that this is legal in, you should tell me if you think it's decent in that format. Now, I do want to say I don't think this card is busted good or anything like that. A lot of cards require generic mana, so it's not like you're going to really slow them down by turning one land into a swamp. But if their deck relies heavily on a specific type of land to function, this can potentially screw them over. It would be way better if it had flash, though. You can also use Evil Presence to activate Swampwalk, which I assume is the original intention of this card, but that's not what I would call the strongest thing to do with the card. Now, there might be some cracked swamp-walking creatures I'm not thinking of, and I guess this is pretty funny if you're trying to build a Soul Canar deck. Maybe that's something you could actually get away with in Pre-Modern, or certain variants of Old School. But I don't think using Evil Presence for Swampwalk is the strongest thing to do with it. That being said, it does give your deck versatility, so I do think it's probably better to use this as pseudo land destruction if you're already going to make use of the Swampwalk. But yeah, it's probably a great way to justify mainboarding something like this. Although, to be fair, any format running any of that stuff probably also has access to Strip Mine, and you would most likely just rather run the Strip Mine. Still, I think it is a pretty valuable piece in the right circumstances, and I do think it is a little underrated. Enchantment removal is generally pretty rare, but does exist, so it's not like this is an airtight solution by any means, but I do think it is a really solid card. If you run 4 copies of this with 4 copies of Strip Mine and Sinkhole, you've got yourself a deck that will get you remembered for being a douche. That's no fun to play with. And that's pretty cool if you ask me. Also, I guess this does see some play in Pauper, but I don't know how much play it sees in Pauper, or what it even does there. I guess you could maybe play Urzatron in Pauper, so maybe it's good against that. I don't know, I'm just guessing here, but I did see a small number of Pauper lists running this card when I looked into it. Anyway, Evil Presence is a pretty cool card that seems like it gets glanced over by most players. I think it's more valuable and annoying than most people realize, and I thought it would be fun to talk about it. But let's talk about the art for Evil Presence, as we have 3 versions to talk about. Evil Presence was printed up until 4th edition with the original art, which was illustrated by Sandra Everingham. I don't actually have too much to say about this art. It's not hilarious, it's not scary, doesn't really tell much of a story, it's just a dark looking swamp. It's well executed, in my opinion, and I do enjoy the art, but I don't really have much to say about it. Evil Presence made it as far as 5th edition before it stopped seeing core set printings, but in 5th edition, they gave it this art, which was illustrated by Bob Eggleton, which is a fantastic name, and I like this art. But everything I said about the original art kind of applies here as well. I like it, but there isn't really anything about it that draws me in. The cloud work is fantastic though, and that murky swamp water might be the best execution of swamp water I've ever seen on a Magic card, which is pretty cool. But I don't really have anything of substance to say about this art. I do enjoy looking at it though. Anyway, Evil Presence stopped getting printed for a long time, but it did come back in New Phyrexia, this time being illustrated by Scott Chow. I'm not really sure what pronunciation is used here. I'm not really sure where they're from. But however Scott's name is pronounced, the art is fantastic. It's super well done, and it's pretty cool to look at. It suffers from the same issues that the other versions suffer from, in my opinion, and that's that it's just not all that interesting to look at, and there isn't too much going on. Evil Presence is a cool card mechanically, but none of the art really sticks with me personally. I do like that this version has more going on, and I think the lighting is really interesting in Scott's version, but it's still not, like, captivating, at least in my opinion. Still, the art is well done, and I kind of like them all. I think I would pick the 5th edition art as my favorite, but I really wouldn't care much on which art I used if I was running this card. But yeah, I think that's all I have to say about Evil Presence. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments if you're interested. Do you know of any formats or variants where this sees strong play? Do you think it's underrated, or do you think I'm gassing it too much? If you think this would be sick as hell in your commander deck, let me know and tell me why. I enjoy reading those comments as well. Also, you can like the video if you liked it. You can subscribe if you give a shit. But either way, I hope you have a magical day. Thank you for watching.